Story 1. 20 years ago, an old witch told me that I wasn't assaulted, claiming that people are too loose with the term and that my clothing choices influenced the situation I had put myself in. I was 15 and he was 20. I did not consent, and it would have been statutory even if I had. I found someone better and worked through it. It was more difficult to open up and trust the next person because of her, but I am grateful I kept trying. Story 2. Mine was that after I told her I was anorexic and struggling with eating, she said, "Well, you don't look underweight." Story 3. When I was 13, in family therapy, the therapist turned to my parents and said, "She's just seeking attention. Ignore her." My dad took his advice, but oddly, it was my mom who didn't. 2 years later, that man was in the evening news and had been sent to prison for fraud because he was not qualified to practice. Story 4. They brought their political views into our sessions. The same person then turned the issues I wanted to discuss into an opportunity to talk about themselves for the remainder of the session. Story 5. Not unprofessional in the sense of unethical, but unprofessional in the sense of incompetence. I came in complaining of racing thoughts and unwanted thoughts. She told me I overthink. Story 6. On my first visit, I was told, "Well, if you have a personality disorder, we might be able to help you. But if you have a character disorder, there's nothing we can do." I didn't go back. Sorry to the early responders. Autocorrect turned character disorder into chatter disorder. I fixed it. What is a chatter disorder? I'm surprised nobody explicitly commented on that. Story 7. I spent my $90 hour listening to her explain that her other patients had bigger issues to address, and I just needed to watch Inside Out 2. Story 8. When I was 11, I was on experimental medications for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and mood regulation. These had extremely adverse effects on my mental health at the time. My grandfather passed away from a variety of severe health issues. He was basically my father. My aunt arranged for a therapist for her kids and me. During the first session, I tried my best to explain the emotions I was experiencing, which were mostly just depression. The therapist told me that 99% of the world had it much worse than I did and that my feelings were invalid because of that. When I tried to leave the session, she violently grabbed me by the collar of my shirt, yanked me to the ground, and tried to force me to stay. In the end, she faced absolutely no repercussions. This experience shut me away from therapy for a long time. I'm in my mid-20s, and I am only just now starting to open up to the idea of getting therapy again. Story 9. I have an amazing therapist and truly value all they have done for me. I don't remember the details about this incident from years ago, but they commented on my situation in a way that seemed to diminish my experience and indicate a lack of understanding of my trauma. It hurt me at the time, and I thought about it for the entire week. In the next session, I confronted them about it and expressed how hurt I was because it felt like they weren't listening or sympathizing. They apologized and explained that they had a lot on their mind that day and that they probably misunderstood the situation. They asked me to explain everything again, offered a sincere apology, and acknowledged that their previous reaction was completely wrong. I wanted to share this because if even my wonderful therapist can sometimes make a human mistake, others can too. Confront them if you feel they have otherwise been a good match for you. Sometimes it can be a misunderstanding or an accidental misuse of language. The important thing is whether they can acknowledge their mistake. Story 10. The first therapist I visited told me what my friend, who referred me to her, had said about my boyfriend. I never went back to her after that and had a serious conversation with that friend. I went to another therapist I found online after a counselor suggested I might have obsessive-compulsive disorder. This woman asked if I thought about having sex with priests, and when I said no, she told me I just had social anxiety, as if that were the only criterion. Story 11. Their assistant moved our appointment forward by 15 minutes without notifying me. The therapist then explained the importance of valuing other people's time, despite my never having been late for an appointment before. Story 12. Back when regression therapy was popular, I had a therapist who convinced me that my father had abused me in terrible ways. I'm so glad they don't practice that anymore. My dad is a wonderful man, And I wonder how many of her patients had similar experiences of turning against their fathers while undergoing regression therapy. Story 13. This was 25 years ago, and I experienced severe anxiety and depression. I had a new psychiatrist who informed me that one of her patients had overdosed on a specific over-the-counter medication. That was harmful information to share with someone prone to suicidal thoughts. As a result, I ended up in the intensive care unit for 5 days due to an overdose of the same medication, based on the idea she planted in my mind. She terminated my treatment after that. Story 14, you smell nice. Before that, would you like to cuddle on the chair? To clarify, no, I did not cuddle with him. He said I smelled nice at the end of the session. Story 15. She told me that she doesn't need to inform me when she's canceling our appointments. She had done it before, and I told her I'd appreciate her letting me know, so I don't waste my time. She simply said I shouldn't be upset about it, and no wonder I have relationship problems. I never went back. Story 16. According to an ex-wife, an older male psychologist we were seeing for couples counseling followed her to the parking lot as we were leaving after a session. She had come in a separate car and I had just left. He told her that I was clearly a menace and that she should get as far away from me as possible. There was no justification for this comment. That was the end of our sessions with him. Story 17. I was told to just get a job when I was dealing with anxiety and depression right after being discharged from the army. It was suggested that working would be beneficial and that I was wasting my time not earning money. Story 18. The first person unexpectedly asked me what I thought about gay individuals. I don't believe I ever saw him again. He tended to stray from the topics I wanted to discuss, and it wasn't really about him. Now that I reflect on it, whether or not I had insurance, the only therapists I ever saw, 3 in total, were all male. I would visit them a couple of times before stopping. They just didn't seem interested in what was troubling me as a woman, only in themselves. The last therapist made me take an intelligence quotient test, which was the final straw. I believe he was from India. Story 19. I was struggling with my eating disorder and weighing myself every day, noticing the scale numbers increasing. When I mentioned it in a session, she suggested I just try the ketogenic diet. I stopped seeing her after that. Story 20. I have post-traumatic stress disorder from an assortment of childhood trauma, including being robbed at gunpoint and temporarily kidnapped about 8 years ago. After the robbery, my psychiatrist and I found the perfect medication combination to help manage my acute PTSD symptoms along with the anxiety and depression that accompanied it. One of the medications I take is called prazosin. Officially, it is a blood pressure medication. Unofficially, it helps break the PTSD cycle by regulating the physical symptoms that come with heightened fight or flight responses. It is important to note that it is not a controlled substance. This combination came about through significant trial and error and was proven effective. Now, one of the lingering PTSD symptoms I have is extremely vivid dreams. I am talking movie theater quality. So realistic that I am often disoriented when I wake up, unable to determine if what I dreamed actually happened. The prazosin helps reduce the vividness of those dreams. Fast forward a few years, and I no longer see my original psychiatrist. In fact, I am not seeing anyone at all, and I'm not doing well. I struggle with sleep, and the dreams are overwhelming. It reached a boiling point where I thought, I need to fix this right now. So I looked online and found a psychiatrist with immediate availability, which should have been a red flag. I should note that I am a cisgender female and the psychiatrist was male. I went to the appointment, delivered a rundown of my situation, and stated that I needed to be put back on prazosin. I felt stuck in a PTSD loop and was having a hard time functioning. Something about me telling him what I wanted seemed to trigger him. He became passive-aggressive and attempted to completely invalidate everything I said. He remarked, "I didn't know you had a medical degree. I thought I was the doctor here." He told me I was depressed, to which I responded, "Of course, I already said that." He even suggested I might have a personality disorder, which I do not. His tone was patronizing and condescending, and it frustrated me. He was determined to ignore the prazosin and kept insisting that I was depressed. Fun fact about me: when I get extremely angry, I cry and my hands start to shake. And I was very angry, He noticed and said, "Why are you crying? See, you're depressed." I told him I was actually trying hard not to insult him and that I had never met a more rude and unprofessional psychiatrist in my life. I declared that the appointment was over and walked out. I later saw a general practitioner to get the Prozosine until I found a psychiatric nurse practitioner who was much more professional. I am happy to report that the Prozosine still works. In summary, the psychiatrist was condescending because I expressed what medication I needed for my diagnosed condition. Story 21. I romanticized my ex stalking me. We were discussing how long it had been, 9 months after the breakup, and he asked if I didn't think it was romantic that he was still pursuing me. I was so stunned. I think I said, "No, actually I think it's psychotic." And then I never went back to him after that. Story 22. The reason I made significant progress with him in discussing my traumas involving various men throughout my life, including instances of abuse, was because he and I had a romantic connection that I should pursue. Story 23. There is no point in trying until you attempt a medication that is only available from a specialist whom I have been waiting a year to see. Story 24. Not me, but my coworker got referred to a therapist. He was told, "I charge hundreds to help you work through things," or you can say, "It is what it is," which doesn't cost money. Somehow that clicked something in him and he stopped going. Story 25. Comparing me to her daughter, who said she wasn't academically smart, felt infantilizing. I stopped seeing her permanently after that session. Story 26. I'm glad you found a medication that worked. I've never heard of that. I walked in on a burglary when I was in elementary school as a latchkey kid and my parents weren't home. We lived in the woods, so nobody was around. I have the most vivid dreams and experience that issue where you can't wake up or move even though you are alert inside your head. It feels almost like a coma, and I can't escape my frightening dream. It's the same dream I've had for 30 years. Anyway, it's supposedly due to the trauma from the robbery. Story 27. I have a story for you. About 13 years ago, when I first started seeing someone, it was an older man, and I was experiencing an existential crisis about global climate change. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Well, sometimes good things come out of this." Everyone was upset about the oil pipes in Alaska, but then they showed that baby seals were actually getting warmth from them and cuddling up to them. You never know. Needless to say, I stopped seeing that guy. Story 28. You have a personality disorder caused by extreme overwhelm from undiagnosed autism. She shared with me that her ex-partner died by suicide, and she discovered him, which triggered a strong freeze reaction within me. She informed her receptionist about my situation in therapy, only to realize that I was actually experiencing abuse, rather than receiving therapy. Story 29. Judging me by saying I was defending someone because I did not want to share the full legal name of a man was abusive. I felt it would expose my privacy since she may have known this person. She kept pushing me to reveal their identity and reprimanded me for not wanting to, claiming I was defending him. Needless to say, I never returned. Story 30. I had a therapist who would challenge me in ways that many would have found confrontational or rude. He would get in my face metaphorically and say things like, "When are you going to push the fear down and just do it? How much longer are you going to beat yourself up like this? She's no good for you. You need to find a way to be stronger." He raised his voice, got personal, and sometimes stood over me while doing this. But it was exactly what I needed. He could tell that I required that kind of forceful attitude. He didn't start with this approach. He was a typical therapist in all other respects. I'm sure he didn't use this tactic with many of his patients, if any. Many would label this as unprofessional. However, he truly helped me in numerous ways. Over time, we both agreed that I didn't need his assistance any longer and that I was equipped to face the world on my own. Perhaps some of the other so-called unprofessional tactics discussed in this context were simply a failed or misapplied version of the same approach. Story 31. Meet Pablo. He is a beautiful black and white fluffy cat. I am not disappointed. I always want to see Pablo. Story 32. You are too cute, he said while resting his palm on my leg. Afterward, he told me he used to cheat on his wife by meeting men in the back seat of his car. Story 33. During my first session, We talked about how I was abused in a Southern Baptist church and school. My mother specifically uses religion to try and emotionally manipulate me, as well as to make poor health and life decisions, such as being against vaccinations and drinking small quantities of bleach, even as we beg her to stop. Our last session abruptly ended. The counselor said, "I think you'd benefit from some spiritual connections, and my church can help you get over your anger at God and faith. I am a Sunday school teacher at First Baptist." I responded, "We're done. You're fired. Goodbye." I did not give them a chance to finish, and I walked out then and there. Story 34. Not me. My daughter recently received a diagnosis of attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder and was hoping to gain coping mechanisms for intense emotions and reactions. The therapist spent the entire first appointment attempting to convince her that the reason she had attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder was her parents' divorce, and that her strong emotions stemmed from not having processed all the anger she felt toward us. Meanwhile, her divorced father and I were sitting in the lobby, chatting as friends and planning to take our child out to lunch later as a family unit supporting her. None of our children have ever expressed any concerns about how we handled our separation, emphasizing the utmost care and respect we had for them and each other. Now that they are all adults, we have discussed it numerous times. Story 35. Not verbatim, but along the lines of, "Need a letter? I will get you a letter. I will make a referral. I will point you to places where you can get the care you need. I will gladly risk my license any day of the week if it means you do not have barriers to gender-affirming care. My therapist really inspires me, and I am already feeling sad that she will be finished at the end of the year." Story 36. After 10 minutes of answering the question, "Why are you here?" she told me I had too many serious issues for her to address, and ended the session by saying I could clear things up with the front desk before leaving. I attempted to ask if she could recommend anyone as she hurried out the door. Her office staff tried to charge me $475. I had clinical depression, struggled with alcohol dependency, and had been waiting for this appointment with her at a private practice for addiction for 3 months. I emailed her on my 10-year sobriety anniversary to express my dissatisfaction with her behavior. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.